Israel and Lebanon agreed to extend the Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire while tensions remain high between the US and Iran.
The war in Iran has pushed the European economy into decline in April while fueling inflation.
EU leaders have gathered in Cyprus for an informal summit to discuss Ukraine, the war in the Middle East, the worsening energy crisis, and the fate of the EU long-term budget.
They like each other. I found that out today.
US President Donald Trump announced Israel and Lebanon have agreed to extend a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. The initial 10-day ceasefire went into effect last Friday and was set to expire on Monday. Trump called the second round of talks between Israeli and Lebanese ambassadors successful, but acknowledged that they, quote, do have Hezbollah to think about.
Israel wants peace with Lebanon, and Israel wants security for its citizens. We're united with the Lebanese government in wanting to rid the country of this malign influence called Hezbollah.
Thank you so much, President Trump. Thank you for your leadership, for making sure to be presiding over this historic moment. And I think with your help, with your support, we can make Lebanon great again.
Meanwhile, tensions between Iran and the United States remain high, with the standoff in the Persian Gulf intensifying as both sides continue to seize each other's vessels. Earlier on Thursday, Trump ordered the U.S. military to, quote, shoot and kill any Iranian vessel that are trying to mine the Strait of Hormuz. Iran, however, accused the U.S. of hindering negotiations through its blockade and threats and said Washington was breaching its commitments.
A national tribute ceremony was held on Thursday in Montauban, France, in memory of a soldier who was killed in an attack on UN peacekeepers in Lebanon. Staff Sergeant Florian Montorio died after the UN peacekeeping force in southern Lebanon, UNIFIL, was hit by small arms fire over the weekend.
C'est l'hommage d'un régiment, c'est l'hommage de l'armée de terre et c'est l'hommage de toute la nation pour ce soldat d'exception. L'adjudant Montorio était un sous-officier parachutiste d'exception.
French President Emmanuel Macron announced a second French soldier, Master Corporal Anissé Girardin, has died Wednesday from his injuries.
Cet instant où nous nous apprêtons à rendre hommage à l'adjudant Florian Montorio, je veux avoir une pensée pour son camarade de combat, le caporal-chef Anissé Girardin, du 132e régiment d'infanterie cynotechnique de Suip, également engagé dans l'opération Daman, qui a succombé hier après-midi des suites des blessures reçues au cours de la même mission.
Both Macron and UNIFIL have accused the militant group Hezbollah, which has denied any involvement. The war in Iran has done what no trade dispute or tariff threat has managed to achieve over the past 2 years. The conflict has pushed the economy into decline in April, while driving inflation sharply higher, according to S&P Global. Germany saw its first contraction in activity in almost a year, while France's slowdown deepened to its weakest level in over a year. The service sector recorded its weakest performance since the pandemic lockdowns in early 2021. Manufacturing paradoxically went the other way, but the gain is misleading. Companies are ordering inputs ahead of expected shortages and further price increases. Hence, the increase in production reflects defensive stockpiling rather than recovering demand.
European Union leaders have gathered in Cyprus for an informal summit where they are discussing Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the war in the Middle East, the worsening energy crisis, and the fate of the EU long-term budget. The summit will also kick off an internal process to establish a mutual assistance clause under Article 42.7 of the EU treaties. It could one day stand in for NATO's Article 5 should the United States withdraw from the alliance, something that President Donald Trump has repeatedly threatened. The discussion takes place in the shadow of the Iran war and was proposed by the president of Cyprus as his country does not belong to NATO and therefore cannot benefit from the alliance's Article 5. Another major discussion topic is the closure of the Strait of Hormuz that is plunging Europe into a worsening energy crisis. One notable absence during the summit is outgoing Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, whose office said he is skipping it due to the handover of power to newly elected Péter Magyar. Two of his outstanding vetoes on the €90 billion loan for Ukraine and the 20th package of sanctions against Russia were lifted earlier on Thursday following the resumption of Russian oil flows through the Soviet-era Druzhba pipeline.
A series of Russian and Ukrainian drone strikes killed at least 6 people overnight after hits on multiple locations, officials in both countries said on Thursday. Authorities in Ukraine's central Dnipro region said Russian attacks on residential areas killed 3 people and wounded at least 10 overnight into Thursday. Emergency services published a video showing firefighters tackling a blaze at a high-rise apartment block with several floors blown out and the facade cratered. While in Russia, authorities reported Ukrainian strikes killed at least 3 people. Meanwhile, the UK's Prince Harry on Thursday praised Ukraine's resilience and urged stronger support for the country. Speaking at the Kyiv Economic Forum, the Duke of Sussex also addressed Russian President Vladimir Putin and called for an end to the war.
I am not here as a politician. I am here as a soldier who understands service, as a humanitarian who has seen the human cost of conflict, and as a friend of Ukraine who believes the world must not grow used to this war or numb to its consequences.
Thursday's visit is Prince Harry's third to Ukraine since Russia's full-scale invasion began in February 2022.
Europe needs to fast become independent from US security framework, said former NATO chief Anders Fogh Rasmussen in an interview with Euronews Europe Today. Europe should opt, where possible, for a European origin preference when purchasing weapons for future defences, he said.
I consider it the worst challenge for NATO during the history of a very successful alliance. So I think we in Europe should conclude we have to be able to stand on our own feet. So we should strengthen our defense, build on a coalition of the willing that could build a strong European pillar within NATO. We need a more European NATO.
Relations have soured even further between Trump and his fellow NATO nations after they rejected calls to assist him in re-securing the Strait of Hormuz. The leaders, including of the UK, Germany, France and Finland, refused to come to Trump's aid, saying NATO was a defensive alliance and they were not obliged to take part in a war of aggression. For Rasmussen, there is a political window opportunity for Europe to make its voice heard.
Europe should use this situation as a leverage to change the relationship between Europe and the United States. We should speak to President Trump the same way as he speaks to us. Time has come to play hardball.
Yeah.
Time for flattering is over.
On one side, it's good because then younger people who are going to be impacted by it, won't be able to get addicted to smoking. But in the same breath, I would argue, civil rights and older people who are informed about all the risks and everything should be able to make their own choices with it all personally.
It's absolutely a really good idea. As a former smoker, I've been giving up now 15 years, and it's the best thing I ever did.
We know all the health risks with it. It affects every organ in your body, and it's antisocial. However, you're talking about rights as well. People have a right to do things, or a right to sort of do unhealthy pursuits like smoking. So that obviously comes into the equation.
The main headline so far at the Regional Ecological Summit here in Astana is that Central Asian leaders have backed President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev's proposal to create an international water organization under the auspices of the United Nations. Initial consultations are now underway on the sidelines of this summit. The Central Asian leaders also convened yesterday for a meeting of the International Fund for Saving the RLC, the region's only platform coordinating joint action on water and environmental issues linked to the shrinking sea. One key outcome was the decision to designate 26th of March as the International Day of the RLC, as well as the Amu Darya and Sir Darya rivers. Leaders also discussed plans to roll out a unified monitoring system across both river basins to ensure more transparent and reliable data. Today marks the second day of the Central Asian Conference on Climate Change, which acts as a strategic bridge between COP summits, helping governments align on adaptation, financing, and regional cooperation. Officials and international organizations are discussing climate policy priorities, funding needs, and ways to strengthen the next round of nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. The day also began with a high-level dialogue under the Tehran Convention, focused on strengthening cooperation to address falling water levels in the Caspian Sea, as well as pollution and biodiversity loss. The aim is to secure political backing and mobilize investment for a regional action plan.